Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got my buddy Couz on from Couz's Corner. Hey, buddy, how you doing today?
Great, TJ. Thanks for having me on again, brother. Always
Yeah,
enjoy it.
I appreciate you, man. If you're not following, if you're a West Virginia fan, a Big 12 fan, like conference realignment, just whatever, go check out Couz's Corner. We'll link that down in the description. I really do think you do a great job. I've
Thank
enjoyed
you.
interacting with you for a couple of years now, a year and a half, to whatever it's been. It's been good, and I really do appreciate it.
Mhm. Ditto, man.
Um,
Same here.
Thanks, buddy. So, well, you said good. You said you were doing good, and maybe compartmentalizing a little bit
I'm good.
because
I'm good personally. Yes.
life is good. Everybody's healthy.
Yeah.
Bills are paid, stuff like that. But a rough time in Morgantown right
Yes, sir.
now after just really a non-competitive game against Kansas State. Kansas State's a good team, right? I'm not trying to. I won't go glass half full just yet, but we'll talk some big picture stuff. But just thoughts on the performance this weekend, and then we'll kind of get into a little bit higher level stuff.
Yeah. I mean, West Virginia loses 48-15 at home at night in a game on national television. It could have been 50. It could have been 52-18. By the way, but Kansas State chose to take a knee deep in their own territory on the final play of the game, so they could have scored again, more than likely. So they took mercy on us. Now there were, West Virginia did have their three best offensive players missed the entire second half with injuries, but they didn't play well in the first half either. So not sure how much that would have helped. Just a bad performance all the way around. Offense didn't look good. Defense didn't look good. It was just bad, man.
So, okay, here's where I'll go pretty glass half full. They have 4 losses, right? But
Mhm.
all 4 losses to pretty good teams, and some more competitive than others. Like that Pitt loss, at this point, I know nobody likes to lose a rivalry game, but that Pitt loss doesn't look so bad. They look like a pretty good team. Obviously, Penn State, a top 5 team. Kansas State, the favorites to be in the Big 12 championship with BYU at this point. Is there a little bit of solace in that? Like, hey, at least we're losing to good teams and beating the teams we're supposed to beat, or thoughts around that? It's just
Mm.
where they are overall as a program, or thoughts around,
Yep.
kind of the losing to good teams?
Fair question. And for someone watching this that's not a West Virginia fan and not really keeping up with what's going on the day to day, that's a very fair outlook. But here's the thing: if we were in year 1 or even year 2 of Neal Brown's tenure here, that might be a valid reason. But we're in year 6.
Yeah.
He's 3-17 against top 25 teams. All 3 of those wins, those teams ended up not being ranked by the end of the year, so they actually weren't that good. They were only ranked at the time he beat them. And 15 of the wins that Neal Brown has in his tenure over FBS opponents, which is like 26 wins or 20 some wins, it's in the 20s, but nonetheless, 15 of those games will have been against teams who have won 5 games or less.
Hmm.
So basically, he can't beat. He's beating teams he's supposed to beat, not beating teams that is at or above their level. And West Virginia's a program historically 15th all time in wins. Really, the only thing West Virginia hasn't done in its history is win a national championship. Right? They've won conference championships. They've played for national championships. They're 15th all time in wins. They've been ranked in the AP top 25 most years, at least at some point, right within that season. They average about 7 to 8 wins a year historically over time. Since Neal Brown's been here, they're averaging 6 wins a year, with one of those always being an FCS team, and they're just not beating anybody with a pulse.
Yeah.
You know, and on the flip side of what you said, if you look at the 3 games they've won, yes, they're 3-4, have lost to 4 good teams, but they've also only beaten Oklahoma State, who's 0-5 in conference play. They've beaten Kansas, who's now 1-4 in conference play, and they've beaten an FCS team. So they also haven't beaten anybody.
Yeah.
If you want to look at the other side of that coin. So it's basically just an accumulation over a 5.5-year period. It's the worst 6-year stretch in West Virginia football since the late 1960s.
Is there, when you look at the outlook the rest of the way, and then we'll talk big picture on Brown and just kind of thoughts in year 6 or after year 6, but looking at the rest of this year, is there any, would going on a winning streak here help that some, or would it just kind of be looked at as like, well, yeah, you can beat these teams on your schedule because there's not a lot of world beaters out there. Obviously, Arizona just got throttled by Colorado, which I do think Colorado is a good team. So, not going to just dismiss that completely. Cincinnati, pretty up and down, not great. Baylor, not great. UCF, continues to find ways to lose. Texas Tech got blown out. So, West Virginia could theoretically win most, if not all of these games down the stretch, not predicting that happens. But will beating 5 bad teams cool some of that. I mean, obviously that would get them to 8 wins. So I guess at the end of the day, that'd be pretty, be happy with that. But I guess it still doesn't, from a big picture standpoint, how many of those 5 teams are finishing over 500? I guess is maybe the question.
Correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so say they go 4-1 down the stretch, or even 5-0. What's the mood then?
Probably not good. I just don't think it's good enough. You know that we're coming off a 9-win season a year ago. They were supposed to get better this year. They returned over 80% of their production on offense. You got a senior quarterback. All 5 of your offensive linemen have starting experience. They're all upperclassmen. I mean, you just name it. Have an experienced defensive line with a bunch of seniors on it. Uh, a lot of hype in the offseason from the coaching staff talking about how great the team is. So, I mean, it just doesn't cut it, man. We don't want we're stuck in the mud. It feels like as a program, and that's just not acceptable. I mean, we're tired of treading water. We want to be competing for, we've been in the Big 12 now for over a decade and still haven't even played for a Big 12 championship game. Have only even sniffed it twice, really, and that both of those were in the Dana Holgorsen era. So it's just we're just tired of treading water, man. We want to be back to West Virginia football, which is being nationally relevant again.
Yeah. Okay, so I saw, the most popular player on a bad team is always the backup quarterback. I saw calls for, replacing Green over the weekend. And, so, I want to talk about quarterback play in a moment. Outside, so your answer can't be anything to do with the quarterback on this one. But what do you think the biggest issue is? And I know that's a very loaded question. If you had that answer, maybe you'd be the head coach. But what is the biggest issue? Because I know that, usually there's not one thing, like there's there's a million things that are wrong, and that's why a program struggles. If there's just one problem, like Alabama's got a bad rushing defense, well, they still do everything else really well. Like what's the biggest issue though in your eyes?
The biggest thing has been pass defense. Their pass defense is atrocious. They don't have one defensive back grading out above a 50 in the 50s in pass coverage. Not one. They actually had one guy who graded at a 28 yesterday in that game. They had a safety grade out with a 28 grade at PFF overall. That's been a huge problem. I mean, Avery Johnson beat West Virginia throwing the football. They held DJ Giddens under 100 yards, man. They held Kansas State rushing to 114 yards and still lost the game. Another issue has been turnovers. Garrett Green threw 4 interceptions all of last year. This year he's already thrown 8. So in half the season. So it's just and they're not getting turnovers on defense. They've only forced 4 turnovers all year. It's just not that math doesn't math, Yeah. And they don't make plays when they need to make plays. So yeah, those are the 3 biggest issues. Just not making plays at winning time, too many turnovers and not forcing turnovers, and then bad pass defense.
What are your thoughts? Obviously, the turnover is an issue. What are your thoughts outside of maybe just the turnovers for Green? What are your thoughts on his play overall? Should they go in a different direction? See what you got for the future. I don't know if Brown's going to be around or not. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But just thoughts on what they should do at the quarterback position, or are you fine with Green sticking it out there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a couple things. I want to first of all preface this by saying Garrett Green's an absolute dog. The young man he's one of the toughest football players I've ever seen. He's tough as nails. He has the heart of a lion. He's a baller. I love him, and he's also a very good individual, very good person. But we came into this season being told he had improved his accuracy. His completion percentage is still less than 60% after being 53% a year ago. He's turning it over at a higher rate than he did a year ago. So he really hasn't improved. And, he's a senior. He should have improved by now. And, that doesn't sit well with the fan base. Now, unfortunately, Garrett got hurt in the first half yesterday and did not play in the second half. So the fan base got their wish, not the way we wanted it, but a lot of the fans who were calling for him to be benched got their wish. Nico didn't play very well either, unfortunately. But at the same time, he was kind of handed a tough situation, right? His best running back was injured. His left tackle was injured. The team was kind of reeling at the moment, so he wasn't handed the best situation. But to answer your question, man, I think this team is built around Garrett Green to an extent. And because of that, and I'm not sure Nico's the answer either. But that being said, if you drop another game here in the next week or two, I think you got to start preparing for the future. And I think you go ahead and put Nico in the game and see what he's got.
So when you talk about that future, this may convolute or make that situation even more complex. Like, what are your thoughts, or have you heard anything about, I mean, would they theoretically part ways at the end of the year? Like, obviously, like fans are, I mean, fans are calling for that after,
Mhm.
in Bama after 4 games. But what are you? I mean, fans are certainly upset. Like, do you think that's realistic this year? Do you not think that's realistic? Like, what are your thoughts on how it shakes out? Does the 9 wins last year buy him a little grace? What are your thoughts on how it goes down there?
Yeah. Well, from a fan base's perspective, if you take the majority of the fans, they want him gone yesterday. But I don't. Nothing's realistic to me until after the season's over. I think Ren Baker's not the type of guy to make a knee jerk decision. He's going to let the season play out because they can technically still, win out like you said and be 7-2 in the conference, right? They might still technically be in the race for the conference championship. On paper, now none of us think that's going to happen because of the way they've been playing,
Sure.
but it's still possible, right? And Ren's not going to make a decision. I don't think knee jerk reaction, but I can tell you, based on what I'm hearing, rumblings I'm hearing, donors are fed up. You now have former players coming out who are fed up. I've heard the term Pop Warner football. I've heard the term in over his head. I've heard the term he needs to resign. All of this from people who used to wear the uniform, and I think that holds some weight when you have people who used to wear the uniform making those statements. So the noise is extremely loud. You have people pulling, you have people pulling funding now from both Country Roads Trust, NIL, and probably from the MAC, the Mountaineer Athletic Club. Uh, and people are probably going to stop attending games, I would imagine. So you're going to start seeing attendance drop off because the fan base is trying to send a message because we're a little we don't really know where the administration sits right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They're not going to come out and say anything. At least we don't think they will because they don't want to overreact. But I don't know that the fan base and the donors are going to give them a choice but to do something at the end of the year if this thing doesn't get turned. Now, if they
Yeah.
do what you said, they probably won't fire him,
Right.
but doesn't mean the fans will still be satisfied.
What if it goes the opposite way? Not necessarily 0-5, but say they go 2-3 down the stretch and he doesn't make a bowl. Do you think at that point they probably would?
I think they probably would. Just a hunch because I don't think the donors would give them an option, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Were it not for the donors, I'm not sure they would because they just signed him to an extension. They would owe him $10 million to buy him out at the end of the year. And that's, West Virginia is not the wealthiest football program out there. They only have a $105 million budget. 20 million of it's going to have to start going to pay players here in another year. Plus you got, can you really afford to pay a coach $10 million to walk away? Right.
Yeah.
But if donors start pulling funding, then I think there's your answer.
Your options get pretty limited. It's all kind
Yep.
of almighty dollar, which makes sense. Like it's fun for us. Well, it hasn't been fun for me and you this year, but it's fun for us, but it's a business for them.
And and I want to throw this stat out there too. This is something that people that aren't West Virginia fans probably don't know. And this is an embarrassing stat. There are as of yesterday, there were four Power Four teams that had not been ranked in the last since 2019, since Neal Brown got to West Virginia. They were Texas Tech, Vanderbilt, Rutgers, and West Virginia. As of today, that list is down to three because Vanderbilt is now ranked.
Yeah.
So that's rare air, and that's not a place West Virginia is accustomed to. There was a time in history where West Virginia beat Rutgers 80-0 in a game.
Yeah.
We're now with them as one of the only teams that haven't been ranked in the AP poll since 2019. So that doesn't sit well with West Virginia fans.
Yeah, that's actually an insane stat to think about. The number of Power Four teams that have been ranked in that situation. Like,
At least
you
once.
think about all the bottom feeders in the ACC and the Big 12 and the old Pac-12. Like, there's a lot of the bottom feeders in the Big 10. The SEC maybe doesn't surprise you. There's less bottom feeders there with Vandy, but
Correct.
yeah, that's actually pretty shocking. You think about all the bad teams in the ACC.
It's
like
embarrassing, man. It's an embarrassment.
There's a lot in there that are just kind of like there. And Syracuse is a fine program, I guess, but. Well, Couz, we'll certainly have to get you back on and talk about this a little bit more, but I know you'll kind of continue to rant on this and cover this and cover all aspects of West Virginia football and more, Big 12 realignment, different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But where can people follow you and find your work?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Find me on Couz's Corner on YouTube, obviously where I cover the college football stuff, and then Couz'sCorner.com is my website. You can check me out there if you want to interact. I'm on X at Couz206. I also have a new channel that I've just, I guess you could say, restarted, called Hoops from the Hills, where we cover West Virginia basketball. I have some other creators over there helping me run that channel. So If you want, now that basketball season's kicking back in, if anybody was interested in that, come check us out. So yeah, that's pretty much where you find us at.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you a ton. Good luck going forward. We need it some our way too, but
Absolutely.
I appreciate you, man, for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, buddy.